Hello, everyone. Welcome to Navigator Business Solutions Customer Experience webinar. Today's webinar is focused on the latest release of ByDesign 2211. My name is Jack Thrush. I'm the accounts director here at Navigator. We're really excited to present this to you. We've got Seth on the line. Most of you have probably worked with Seth. He's one of our support techs, and he'll be able to do a great job presenting the latest release here. Just one quick housekeeping item in order to cut down on the background noise and the echo effect of GoToWebinar. Everyone is placed on mute. If you do have some questions, you can chat them in the either the chat box or the question box on your GoToWebinar pop out. And then if we have some time, we can talk through some of the questions and follow up if necessary. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Seth.
Sounds great. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Got quite a few topics to cover with the 2211 release, and we'll just get started with the cross-area topics. So with this release, they've added the machine learning cockpit, which will allow key users to create predictive scenarios by using data from analytics reports and data sources. The model can then be applied to new data to make actual predictions, and then can then be consumed directly into business documents and analytics. They've also enhanced the support for the US 1042S tax form. The UI has been enhanced with 2 additional fields, the chapter indicator and the LOB treaty category. Additionally, the new tax exemption reasons and income types have been updated in the respective fields. It's now possible to perform data extraction for contact persons using the contacts extraction object, and it'll then be available as a migration template for your contacts. They've added a new communication scenario for REST API services. It's to allow for technical users to communicate with the system via REST API. You can now enable ByDesign as the system for cross-domain identity management, or SCIM 2.0. SCIM is a standard for automating exchange for user identity information between domains and IT systems. This one's going to be a bit more applicable to pretty much everybody. They've updated their password security policy. As you can see, business user version 2 is now available, and the existing business user password security policy is deprecated, and the new password policy will require a minimum of 15 characters and will remember your previous 15 passwords, so you won't be able to reuse any of them. If your current password policy is set to business user, which is the default, it will automatically update to version 2. And so the next time you reset your password, it's going to require these additional characters. If it's set to something other than business user, then it won't update, so you won't have to worry about it. Most of you who have dealt with outbound emails and such have already done this, but if you haven't, there's been a change in the domain keys identified mail or DKIM key activation process for any business emails or transactional emails being sent from the system through your sender domain. And so if you haven't performed that yet, you'll probably already have seen that your emails aren't going through. Just reach out to us and we'll be able to walk you through getting that set up. You can now enable the new ByDesign add-in for Microsoft Outlook. The new add-in supports all existing functionalities and has been enhanced with features such as an improved UI, direct access to accounts, contact, campaigns, leads, and opportunities. You can now define workflow rules for credit memos, materials, and service product business objects and enable notifications or emails based on user-defined conditions. The additional customer information maintained in the notes section of the leads and opportunities documents is now also reflected in the follow-up sales quote document. They've also made a number of enhancements to the dispatching board. You can now assign service order items on a day off and add additional fields in the service order items section. They've also added a number of languages to the business card scanning, Hebrew, Korean, Japanese, and Chinese. You can now define exclusion rules for both the net and gross procedures of the account hierarchy, specific price list, and customer hierarchy specific discount list. In the price lists and discount lists view of the product and service portfolio work center, the account hierarchy specific price lists and customer hierarchy specific discount lists can now be enabled up to 5 levels. Next, we're going to talk about financial management. One of the big features that have been included in this release is landed costs. So we'll be seeing quite a bit of information on this. Firstly, that ByDesign now supports landed costs. You can now plan landed costs and purchase orders to get an early transparency on total costs, allocate the invoice landed costs to good receipts, and have a more accurate material valuation of inventory, WIP, and costs of goods sold. You can analyze landed costs for materials and compare planned and actual values. ByDesign supports multiple parallel sets of books with different capitalization requirements for landed costs. And now we're going to go through a few of the features that landed costs and how it's being implemented throughout the system. They've added a new area, obviously they've added new activities in the business configuration section for different customizations and things like that to define whether a landed cost type must be handled as capitalized or as expenses. Account determination under the subledger payables in transit, a new column is available for assigning accounts based on landed cost category. Configuration and derivation settings for expanded expense landed costs. In business configuration, they've added a new activity available for the configuration of expensed landed costs. For landed costs and purchase orders, you can plan landed costs in the purchase order. The inbound delivery posting contains the landed costs. In the case of capitalized landed costs, the moving average of the material is updated. For allocation of landed costs, you can allocate the invoice landed costs to a goods receipt as the basis for updating the planned amounts with the actual amounts and its clearing in financials. This also has the flexibility to decide when to update the planned landed cost amounts with the actual allocated invoiced amounts. You can view the landed cost invoices and allocate them from the work center supplier invoicing landed cost invoice items. You can decide when to update the planned landed cost amounts for inventory valuation with the actual allocated invoiced amounts and perform the clearing. You can use the report landed costs, monitor and set clearing status for good receipts to analyze the variance between the planned landed costs and the actual landed costs and decide when clearing is required. The landed cost clearing runs determine the value differences between the planned and allocated landed costs and clear the purchase in transit and unbilled payables landed cost accounts. You can execute a landed cost clearing run for past periods or for the current period. The landed cost clearing run is available under the periodic tasks in inventory valuation in the inventory valuation work center. They've also added a number of appropriate landed costs reports and data sources. As you can see, here are a number of reports that are now available for landed costs, including financial analysis, monitor, and set clearing status for goods receipts, balance summary, and line items. We will be coming back to landed costs, but now we're going to move on to human resources. You can now choose to exclude unpaid break time while determining the threshold category for automatic break deduction in the time reporting profile of the employee. You can now view the details like service ID, location, and service order item ID of a service order item that has been planned for the day under the details section in the resource calendar. The service order details section is visible when you click on a service order item or a corresponding service in the resource calendar. For the cost center replication scenario in the integration of ByDesign with SuccessFactors, the basic authentication flow is now deprecated and OAuth-based authentication flow is now supported. This is due to the to SAP moving towards JSON tokens. Coming back to landed costs, but this time we're going to be viewing it from within the scope of supplier relationship management. You can plan landed costs and purchase orders to have a more accurate inventory valuation for moving average managed materials and the cost of goods sold. You can allocate the invoice landed costs to a goods receipt as the basis for updating the planned amounts with the actual amounts and its clearing in financials. You have the flexibility to decide when to update the planned landed costs amounts as the basis for inventory valuation with the actual allocated invoiced amounts. You can analyze landed costs for a material and compare planned and actual values. ByDesign now has a predefined set of landed cost categories. These categories are fixed but can define customer-specific landed cost components and assign them to one of the pre-delivered landed cost categories. On landed cost components level planning and valuation of landed costs, as well as the allocation of landed costs between estimated and invoiced values. If you want to maintain additional landed cost information, you must define cost components before creating a purchase order. You can maintain landed cost components against predefined landed cost categories. Maintaining landed cost components in purchase orders helps you to store information on the additional landed costs incurred during the procurement of goods. To add customer-specific landed cost components, you can use the common task define landed cost components available under purchase requests and orders. Once you define the landed cost components in the define landed cost component common task, you can plan landed costs when you create a purchase order for to-stock material from the work center purchase requests and orders. You can add landed cost components to a purchase order at the header level under prices and cost tab in the purchase order overview view. When you add landed costs at the header level, you can specify if you want to calculate the landed costs as a fixed value or as a percentage of the total value of the purchase order. The landed costs are distributed to the item level by net value of the item. You can also add landed cost components to a purchase order at the item level under items, prices, and cost in the purchase order overview view. When you add landed costs at the item level, you can specify if you want to calculate the landed costs based on a fixed value or as a percentage of net value of the item. Also, the distributed amount from the header level is displayed. In the supplier invoicing work center, you can capture the invoices for the actual goods as well as the invoice for landed costs separately. To prevent conflicts with and to distinguish landed cost invoices from other existing invoice processes, the landed cost component is added to invoice and credit memo items. Once a cost component is maintained, the corresponding invoice item or credit memo is considered as a landed cost invoice item or credit memo item. You can allocate landed costs to the inbound delivery material items by creating a document called an allocation document, which maintains the allocation information. Excuse me, which maintains the allocation information for the landed cost invoice item. You can allocate landed costs for the work center, supplier invoicing, landed cost invoice items. You can also create an allocation document when you create a landed cost invoice without purchase order or credit memo with the allocate button on the line item. The landed cost invoice items view contains a list of all invoices and credit memo items. This view gives you an overview of the progress of the allocation process and helps in organizing the allocation accordingly. This view shows the landed cost invoice items that have to be allocated are already allocated and sent for the next step in the process, or are allocated but not yet released or canceled. Using this view, you can create, copy, cancel, delete, or release an allocation item. Moving on to project management. To improve the performance of project invoicing, the following rules apply in case of large numbers of non-invoice time and expense items. If there are more than 5,000 non-invoiced time and expense items, the expense restriction period will be defined by the system so that only 5,000 items fall within this period. A message informs the user of the restriction. If the user enhances the period so that more than 5,000 but less than 20,000 items fall within this period, a warning asks the user to define a smaller period. And if the user enhances the period so that more than 20,000 items fall within this period, the change is rejected by the system. If a project invoice request is based on an invoice schedule, and if there are more than 20,000 non-invoiced and expense items, the project invoice request is not created automatically. Instead, the user is informed via the work list that the project invoice request cannot be created due to too many non-invoiced time and expense items. The user then needs to cancel the relevant invoice schedule item and create the project invoice request manually. And moving on to mobile, for the ByDesign mobile app. The new Horizon theme has been introduced. To avoid confusion, the language field has been removed from the My Settings area. This language setting is applied when an email is sent to the user from your ByDesign system. You can still access the language field using the application user management. Business users edit attributes with regard to the language settings of the app itself. Please note that the app automatically uses the language that is set for the mobile device. They've also added a number of security improvements and enhancements, and they've also deprecated the Android version 8.0. Mandatory in-app downloads are no longer required. With the new release, mandatory downloads of updates while starting the app are no longer required. As a result, the overhead is reduced and the footprint on user devices is minimized. It is there will still be cases where downloads are required, specifically for security and things like that. Push notifications now lead users directly to the relevant tiles. The supported minimum iOS version has been increased to 12, and again, they've made a number of security improvements.